I don't have to tell you that our world has been turned upside down, mixed up, and flipped over again. When I think about COVID-19 and the fear and the anxiety it brought of, maybe possibly getting sick or our loved ones getting sick and dying, and just the stress of everyday living was so overwhelming. Plus the idea of, later on as we experience the financial crisis and businesses, just really suffering because, they're not open and don't have income, and then the loss of employment, that's just, I can't imagine what it must be like for people who have lost their jobs or who have been furloughed, and how stressful that must be. And then in recent weeks, and even like the last couple months too, right, with the tragic death of Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd, and just the heartbreak that we experienced and their deaths, and the casualness of the police officers, and not pressing charges, and just the anger and frustration and of racial prejudice is that's overwhelming. And so I think just the combination of everything, it's hard, and I don't want to minimize that, and I want to validate that even one of those on their own would have been hard, but the combination of all three is really hard. Whatever, our brain senses that danger, senses that there might be a threat to us, right? And that we will go into fight, flight, freeze, or fold mode, because that's the way that God created us, and that's normal. And so some of us might want to, fight it and just be like, we're gonna beat this. We're going to do whatever we can to get rid of the fear, because we don't want to feel it. And then flights, we want to avoid it. We want to suppress those feelings and be like, no, we're okay. And we might bury ourselves in work or watch Netflix, but it's that I'm not going to think about it. I'm not going to feel it. And we're just going to avoid what we're experiencing right now. And then the freeze is I do this a lot. I just literally freeze. It's hard for me to do anything. Everything seems slow and a chore. And it's like, I can't think. It's like if you looked at my brain, you'd see that circle where it's buffering and buffering. And I'm trying to process, and I'm trying to get on with my day, but I just keep buffering, and it's really hard to do anything. And then there's fold, which is where you just give in. You give up your autonomy, and you just kind of give up on life, in a sense of I'm not going to make any choices, and I give up my voice, and I'm just kind of going to go along with it. And so when we live in that kind of fear, when we live in that fight, flight, freeze, or fold mode, it's really hard on us, because we're not dealing with the actual fear, right? And living in that way, it just really it takes a toll on our bodies. It takes a toll on our minds and our emotions, and even on our spiritual life. Jesus is inviting us to calm our fears. He wants to be with us, because he doesn't want us to live like this. He loves us and wants what's best for us, and he knows that that's unhealthy for us. And he wants us to be present with him. He's inviting us to be present with him, to experience his peace and his love and his comfort. That he wants to hold us and tell us that everything is going to be okay, not because our circumstances are changing, but because he is with us. And so that allows us to, whatever call to action we choose to do, that's going to allow our action to be from a place of love, not from a place of calming our fears and making us feel better, but it's a place where we can give to others and think about them and what's best for them. And that's the loving thing to do. So the Psalms were written by a group of people who were marginalized, vulnerable, and oppressed. And they are crying out to God for justice. They're crying out and hoping to, change the dominant culture, the people who are oppressing, the people of power, to change their ways, to change the system, so that we could have justice in our world. And so let's read Psalm 23 in that context. The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters, and he refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. And even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil. For you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies, and you anoint my head with oil, and my cup overflows. Surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life. I love what David says, that he calls the Lord his shepherd because he knows what a shepherd is. He's been a shepherd. And so he lacks nothing. And in these first 3 verses, it's about this kind of ideal world of what life should be, right? That it should be peaceful, that he should be able to lie down in these green pastures, that it's a relaxation, that these are good times. But then David, he doesn't, and all the Psalms, right? They don't just live in that ideal world, that they lean into the reality of life, that in life there are dark valleys, that there are pandemics, that there is racial divide, that there is hatred and a lack of understanding for one another, and sickness and financial crisis and death and loss of business. And I don't have to keep going on. You guys know what I'm talking about, that there are things in life that push us to the edge, and we feel like we're going to fall over and be swallowed up by darkness, that our world is overwhelming. And I love that he leans into that and he acknowledges that. And then he says, but the shepherd knows what's right, and he knows that he can trust him, and that he has what's his best in mind for him. And that, what comforts him, like he doesn't fear evil, he doesn't fear the enemy, because he knows that his rod and his staff, it brings comfort to him, because the rod and the staff, that's what the shepherd uses to protect him from the enemies. That when the lions and the bears and the rattlesnakes want to come and kill them and destroy them, that he protects them with the rod and the staff. And so that's why it comforts him, that he knows that when the enemy comes, the shepherd doesn't leave and take off and leave the sheep vulnerable, that the shepherd stands with them and is for them and fights for them. And I think that's something for us to remember, that in the midst of this pandemic and all of the crises, that we can lean into our fear, because we're not alone, that we don't have to handle this alone, and that it's hard and it's easier to avoid, and we're going to naturally want to freeze or just give in and just give up. But our Lord is with us. And that we have this, not a false hope, but because of who God is, we have a hope of verses 5 and 6, right? That you prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. And I don't know why I never saw this before, but in the midst of the storm, in the presence of your enemies, in the presence of the things that want to destroy and attack, in the presence of the evil that's happening in this world, that our Lord prepares a table for us. And a table, as we know, is about relationship. It's about belonging and acceptance. And he says, I prepare a table for you. And let's, when we have tables and people over and our friends over and we're eating, there's joy, there's relaxation, there's rest, there's just this sense of connection, that we and the overabundance, that you anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. There's a sense of abundance, this sense of more and abundance that God has and desires for us. And then he says, surely your goodness and your love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And I think that he's inviting us to experience his love and his goodness, that he's faithful and we can trust him, that he's with us and wants to fight evil along with us, that it's not just our battle, but it's his. And he wants he's inviting us to join with him, and he will guide us and help us and give us the strength and the grace and whatever we need to not just get through this, but we have this hope of thriving through it, of having this abundance and this love and this goodness, just an abundance of that. But he's inviting us to step into the darkness Not to suppress it, not to try and avoid it, and not to squash it, but to lean into Him, to step into Him for the goodness and the love that He has for us. That it's scary, we're overwhelmed, but He hasn't left us. He hasn't abandoned us. He is fighting with us, and He's fighting for us, and He has His best in mind. And whatever happens, that He will be with us and will help us through it. And that as much as we want justice, as much as we want peace, as much as we want good health or businesses to thrive, He wants that too. He is on our side. He's for us, and He hasn't left us or abandoned us. So as we go through this next week, we're going to talk about this more next week. But for this week, I want to encourage you to spend 15 minutes to just sit down and, in a sense, think and reflect on Psalm 23. And the first thing I want you to do is write down, the Lord is my, and then fill in the blank. For David, the Lord was his shepherd. What is the Lord for you? And the second thing is to write down the things that you are going through. Just list them all out. And I know that takes a lot of courage, and it's hard enough to do when times are good. But during, it's so important for us to get to acknowledge the dark valleys in our lives. And so what are your dark valleys? What do you want to complain about or share with God about? It could be, I wish we didn't have to go this. I wish I could go outside. I wish we had justice in this world. I wish that, my friend wasn't sick. I wish my business wasn't going to close. Whatever it may be, write down what you wish. And then write down what you wish God would do. I wish He would heal my friend. I wish He would bring justice to this world. I wish, and then ask Him what you want Him to do. And may we, in that process of addressing our Lord, who loves us, who we can trust and who is faithful, and writing down our wishes, may we experience just that new hope that we have, that's not false, that's not made up, that's not something we're just trying to talk ourselves into, but it's a real hope in the one who gives us hope, because He is love. He is good. He knows what it's like to suffer. He's experienced it Himself. Who is with us, who promises to never leave us or abandon us, who fights for us, what's going on in our world breaks His heart even more so than it breaks ours. And may that understanding and faith and trust in God, may our dwelling with God give us the hope that we so desperately want and need, so that we can do things from a place of love and not from a place of fear. So that our call to action, our service, will be more of His love going out into the world, as opposed to us squashing our fear. And I think that is how we're going to experience heaven together.